At 65, Laura had seen it all. She had lived a life full of adventures, heartaches, and moments of joy that could fill volumes. But now, as the years added up, she found herself standing on the edge of a new reality, one that wasn't so much about what she had done but what she was becoming. She had raised children, worked hard, and nurtured countless relationships throughout her life. Yet now, as her body creaked and her energy wavered, it wasn't the presence of her family that gave her the comfort it once did. They had their own lives now, and they were busy, leaving her to reflect on the truth she'd come to realize. Family wasn't the pillar of support she had always believed it to be after the age of 60. Her thoughts were interrupted one evening as she sat in her cozy living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Her daughter, Emily, called her every week, asking how she was doing. But even those brief conversations felt distant at times, as if Emily's life was happening somewhere far away and Laura's concerns were no longer a priority. But Laura wasn't about to let loneliness become her defining trait. She had learned over the years that, at this stage in life, the most reliable support came from within herself and 6 key pillars she had come to trust. These 6 pillars weren't things she could rely on other people for. They were her tools for survival, her roadmap for finding peace and purpose beyond her family connections. The first of these pillars was health. Laura had always been active. She remembered the days when she jogged in the mornings, when she could bend and stretch without thinking twice about it. But aging brought its share of physical challenges. Her knees weren't as forgiving as they used to be, and her energy fluctuated with the seasons. But she was determined not to let her body slow her down. Every morning, she woke up and took time to practice gentle stretching exercises. She found peace in the act of listening to her body, honoring its limits, but pushing them when necessary. She knew that health after 60 wasn't just about avoiding illness, but about strengthening the mind-body connection that had often been overlooked in her younger years. It was about eating well, staying hydrated, and giving her body the love and care it deserved. A few years ago, she'd started taking yoga classes. At first, it felt a little daunting, but over time, it had become one of the most important rituals of her day. The instructor, a woman named Linda, was in her 70s and exuded a calm energy that Laura admired. Linda had taught her that it wasn't about bending into a perfect pose. It was about listening to the rhythm of your own body and nurturing it, not forcing it into something it couldn't do. Health, Laura realized, was the first pillar. If her body wasn't taken care of, nothing else would matter. It was the foundation upon which everything else rested. It was a pillar that gave her the strength to carry on, day after day. The second pillar was purpose. Laura had always been a person with goals, but as she approached her 60s, she found herself in a strange phase of questioning. Her children were grown, her job was no longer a defining aspect of her identity, and the quiet of her home sometimes left her feeling aimless. But one afternoon, as she was cleaning out the attic, she came across an old journal from when she was in her 40s. It was filled with sketches, poems, and thoughts she'd had about her future. And among the pages was a list of things she had hoped to achieve: learning to play the piano, writing a book, traveling to Greece. Laura smiled as she read through the list. Yes, some of those dreams had been put on hold, but they weren't gone. Purpose, she realized, wasn't just about having a career or taking care of others. It was about doing the things that made your soul come alive, no matter how old you were. She picked up a notebook and started drafting the first chapters of a book. It didn't matter if it would never be published. What mattered was that it gave her a sense of meaning and direction. In fact, she felt more purpose now than she had in years. Purpose didn't come from external validation, it came from within. It was a personal quest, one that allowed her to rediscover parts of herself that had been dormant for far too long. The third pillar was self-reliance. Laura had always been independent, but in her 60s, she had begun to notice how much she had relied on others. Family, friends, even neighbors, everyone had played a role in shaping her life. But as time went on, she realized that relying too heavily on others could sometimes lead to disappointment. She had seen friends struggle with the absence of their children or partners. The reality of growing old sometimes meant being left to navigate the world alone. But Laura had made a promise to herself to never be completely dependent on anyone else. She had learned the art of managing her own finances, maintaining her home, and making decisions without second-guessing herself. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, especially when technology seemed to advance faster than she could keep up. But Laura had developed a resilience that helped her navigate life with confidence. She was determined to be her own support system, to be the person who took control of her life and didn't wait for others to step in. The fourth pillar was community. While Laura had learned not to rely solely on her family, she knew that human connection was vital to well-being. But in her 60s, she found that the relationships she had once nurtured weren't as easily maintained. Old friends had moved away, and new acquaintances seemed harder to make. So, she found new ways to build a sense of belonging. She started volunteering at the local community center, helping with events, and assisting the younger generation in organizing programs. She discovered that building community wasn't just about being surrounded by people, it was about contributing to something bigger than herself. Through volunteering, she met others who shared similar interests and values. Some were younger, some were older, but all had one thing in common. They understood the power of giving back. It was through this pillar that Laura found a sense of connection that didn't depend on blood relations. It was a reminder that relationships were not just about family, but about shared experiences and common goals. The fifth pillar was creativity. Laura had always enjoyed expressing herself through art. In her earlier years, she had dabbled in painting and photography, but as she aged, she found new outlets for creativity. Gardening became one of her greatest joys. She planted a small garden in her backyard, where she grew everything from roses to tomatoes. But creativity wasn't limited to gardening. It was in the way she approached daily life. She began to write poems, to learn how to play new instruments, to take up knitting. Creativity allowed her to push the boundaries of what she thought was possible, and it kept her mind sharp. The act of creating something, whether it was a painting, a meal, or a piece of music, provided her with a sense of accomplishment. It was a reminder that creativity didn't age. It only evolved. No matter how old she was, she could still be a creator. The final pillar was faith. Laura wasn't particularly religious, but she had a deep sense of spirituality that had always guided her. Whether it was finding peace in nature, seeking solace in quiet reflection, or finding purpose in help,